very sorry, but I do not speak a bit of Spanish. Otherwise, I would have tried to do it. My first experience with French when I arrived in Marseille in 2000, I was very happy to have written one sentence in French. And I went to the pharmacy to buy a medicine, and I didn't anticipate the next step. I proudly said my question, and the answer was, so I'm going to continue on in English. Thank you very much for this opportunity to come and present Mama Spice to all of you. To tell you a little story, I must have been 3 or 4 years old, and in our house, in my grandmother's house, there was this lady. She was pregnant. She had a big tummy, and I was watching her grind. You know, in the old times, we had the stone mortar and pestle, which is big. And she was grinding coriander and cumin. And they were roasted before. And I was like, oh, this smells good. And then I see her big fat tummy, and then I ask her, when is your baby coming? So the next thing she does is, she gives me this pillar, and she says, hold it, and grind. And I'm like, what? And she runs off, and she's screaming to my grandmother that she's going to go and give birth to a baby. And I'm there holding this pillar, looking at the poor coriander and the cumin that have been abandoned, and I'm like, what do? I can't hold this. And I let it go. It stayed with me throughout my life. And I kept thinking, that baby could have chosen another time to come and not have her leave all the spices like that. Another thing is, I love chili. Different types of chili. The first time I saw chili, the color, red color, miles and miles of chili that is roasting in the sun. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And I go when you're small over here in the snow, you go, children, they do this. I dived into the pile of chili, and I did the same. And I was thinking, oh, it's nice, but it's kind of, it's hot. It must be the sun. And my eyes were crying, and then it was much later than I realized that it was actually the chili. It didn't have anything to do with the sun or the heat. This has been my experience since I was born with spices. I've seen my mother, I've seen my grandmother, I've seen my aunts, basically everyone around me use spices. So when I came to France and I wanted to start something on my own, my obvious choice was to do something with spices. Today, when I am with my spices, it's that one space where I can create something which can bring magic into other people's kitchens. And that is really what I have tried to do by blending two totally opposite gastronomical cultures, Indian cuisine and French cuisine. When I have a small child who eats peas made with just absolutely the same way that is cooked probably at home, with just a bit of spice, and that small child enjoys it, it's a very good validation for me when I say if a child can eat with spices, spices can be used everywhere. And every time I've created something, it is part of my life and where I have my dreams and where I would like to take that little jar once it's in somebody's home they voyage with it. Today, I have 14 unique spice blends. I didn't want to start by saying, okay, I'm going to have X number of products in my product range. What I tried to do is, with the little bit of knowledge, by combining, let's say, parsley with cumin, with ginger, and fennel. You can use it with meat, with fish, with vegetables, with lentils. It should not give the same taste. And that's exactly what I have tried to do with the Mama Spice blends. No matter what you cook with it, it gives you a different flavor. It gives you a different aroma. And because they are my creations, I have named them as I would name my children. The one spice blend, which is called koi, I named it koi because koi in Malayalam, which is my mother tongue, it means chicken. It was the first dish that I made. And it is an adaptation of my mother's recipe, and it only exists in my mother's head. And when I asked her, well, how do you make it? And she goes, well, you just put a bit of this and put a bit of that. There was no proportion. And I made it in such a way that it could be used by the Western palate. And it was usually for salty dishes, savory dishes. And one of the clients came up and she said, I made applesauce with your koi. And I was like, wow, it's not supposed to be a spice for dessert. Seeing that creativity happen with people, it's incredible. What I have done is to adapt the typical French dishes with spices. And sahi is the opposite way. I took the most iconic dish, which is an Indian dish called biryani, and I used my spice blend in biryani. It's one of my son's favorite dishes, and I told him, okay, what do you think? It passed his test, and so I named it Sahi, which means the truth in Hindi, and it's an anagram of my son's name. When I started Mama Spice, I had a certain vision. When I would go and buy from the market or the supermarket, I would see caddies that were filled with ready-made food. And I wanted to create an impulse where people, we don't have much time because we're working, we come home probably late, we don't feel like cooking. So something that is very easy to use and simplifies the work of cooking with the inspiration for people once they cook. There's something healthy about it, and that's something that I really wanted to do, inspire healthier communities by just connecting them with spices in their real food. And that's the base foundation of Mama Spice. And the three pillars are, I've looked for organic spices, so suppliers who really produce organic spices. I source my Indian spices from India and the herbs, the French aromatic herbs, from the local region. The Indian suppliers that I have chosen, they really reflect the image that I want to give of Mama Spice. You know, in India, with Monsanto and a lot of farmers who are very deeply in debt, we call it a suicide economy. And what these suppliers have done is to get these agriculture farmers together and to transition from an industrial pesticide-using farming method onto organic farming, coming back to the roots. And between them, they have about more than 400,000 farmers who have now converted to organic farming. And part of the horrible results of the suicide economy is once the male head of the family is gone, the woman has no means of sustaining herself. So what they do is they go to the rural areas of India and they employ these women. And this has a very direct link with my story. Fair trade. They have made the transition to organic farming using the principles of fair trade. The third aspect, a socially responsible enterprise. In France, in Marseille, I have found, I don't know if this same thing exists in Spain, but there are hospitals where the disabled people, they cannot find employment outside, as we can do. So I have been in touch with them and I have said, listen, I have a project and I would like to have my packaging done by you. Is it something that you can do? And all the packaging, the conditioning is done by these people. And it's just my way of giving back to society a bit, and everything to do with environment. Once Mama Spice products, they're available in small jars. They're fully glass bottles, so which can be recycled and reused. You can put them into your machine, wash them, and reuse them. And you can buy sachets, which are recycled paper bags, with spices to fill in your jars. So it's a process where I've tried to combine the three aspects with the hope that what's inside those jars will be the next innovation in the culinary scenario. Just adding spices, be it to pasta. I have an interesting anecdote about that. My ex-boss was Italian, and I was on the phone, and after the day, we sort of have a meeting over the phone where I'm cooking. And so he says, what are you cooking tonight? I said, I'm making bolognese. And he goes, oh, you're making bolognese. How do you make your bolognese? So I said, onion, garlic, ginger. And he goes, no, there is no ginger in bolognese. I said, yes, there can be ginger in bolognese. It's very good. And he goes, Devaky, I will make real bolognese for you. I said, I will make you eat my bolognese. I'm not saying it's going to be better. It's just a different bolognese. But it's still called bolognese. And when you put spices into whatever dish you're making, it just takes it to another level. And today when you look at spices, it's very geographically clustered. You have Indian food, you have Mexican food, you have Ethiopian food, and the spice blends are dedicated to a certain type of cuisine. I wanted to break that barrier. I wanted to make spices universal for all types of cuisines. And that is the part where the inspiration comes. What you can do, even if you're an amateur, you don't know how to cook, it's just a way of adding a different flavor to your meal. And imagine what chefs can do. This whole thing, to come back to the initial point, is a healthy eating habit. With my spice blends, my one rule was it has to go with all vegetables first. Number 2, no salt, no sugar, and no additives. A spice in itself is an additive. It enhances the flavors, so you don't need to add something else. And I've tried to keep that pure. All this took me about a year to put into place. And 2017, I was a one-woman show. And in 2018, I've realized that I cannot be everywhere. I cannot do everything on my own, so I need to bring in people with the right competencies. I'm not a very good salesperson. I will go meet different people and I will talk to them about my spices, and when I come back, they'll ask me the question, so, are they going to buy your spices? I'm like, I don't know. But I had a lovely time talking to them about my spices. And they're, yeah, but Devaky, if you want to do a business, you need to get customers to buy your spices. And I realized that, and so I'm bringing in an old colleague. We've worked together. Her name is Leticia Juarez. She is French, but she speaks so many different languages, and language for me is very, very important, and which is why I said I'm really sorry I don't speak Spanish. When you talk in a person's language, it sort of breaks down a lot of barriers, and the communication is much easier. There's that flow which comes in. And Laetitia, she has always worked in international sales. And 15 years ago, when we met, she said to me, the day you start your company, call me. It's exactly what I did. And she's coming on board this year. Logistics. India. I'm a woman. And India is kind of particular. So that's where Sham comes in. Sham and I met in 2010. That's part of the story I'm going to tell you before Mama Spice. Mama Spice is my third life in this lifetime. And before my third life, I had a second life, which I'll talk to you about. Sham, right now, he is the Director of Logistics and Support for Airbus Helicopters in India. And when we met up, and he's always been telling me, what are you doing here? You should be starting your own company. And I'm like, And so when I started my company, he said, I'm in. If you ever need me, I'm in. And so I said, Sham, I really need you to be the one who will go out and meet those farmers with the suppliers. He said, no problem, I love driving. Mama Spice started out as an e-boutique on the Mama Spice website. And everything about Mama Spice, from the logo to the name to the website, everything is DIY. And the IT guy was Mr. Benoit Olive. He's my husband. And he's not going to be part of the team, but when I need an IT person, he has over 20 years, about 20 years of experience with IBM. So the IT man to go for me is him and my son, who's another computer geek. Why? Because having that responsiveness when there is an issue, an IT issue. I have been in the corporate world for 15 years, and one of the most frustrating things is when things don't work and you have to go click, 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 click. I didn't want that for Mama Spice. I wanted the boutique experience, even if it's online, to be just smooth, perfect for my clients. So Benoit takes care of that. I could go on my own, but I'm the one who has to produce the spice blends, and I realize my own limitations. So getting the support that you need to continue to grow is very important, and knowing what your limitations are so that you can let other people do their magic just give them the freedom. That's how I worked, and that's how the other three minds have come together. And with the four of us, I think Mama Spice is only going to go the way we think it should go. I spoke about my second life, so I made a storyboard. I came to France in September 2000. When I was 20, it's customary in India for parents to arrange the marriage of their daughters. My parents were very educated. They come from a not poor background or anything, but it's just cultural. When you have a daughter, when you have a girl, from the time she's 18 years old, there's one thing on parents' mind: I have to find a good husband for her. And this is what they thought they did. Unfortunately, it lasted 5 years. And for me, I was brought up in such a way where violence and marriage should not coexist in the same sentence, period. So in 2000, I plotted my great escape. I took my 3-year-old son, 3.5, and I got admission in Kedge Business School in Marseille, and I basically ran away with my 3-year-old because I had a Bachelor of Arts degree. I was 5 years old. I had never worked. I was a mom. Nobody was going to give me a job. And I wanted to do the job that I liked, that gave me a certain financial independence. So I decided to put myself back to school and study. So when I went to school, what I didn't realize coming to France was every Wednesdays was a holiday. So I went and met with all the teachers, and I said, can I bring in an extra student, please? I promise you he's very silent and he's very studious. So my son, 3.5, came with me every Wednesday to class. And while I studied, he painted, he colored, he did stuff. I kept him busy as much as I could. Marseille is the place that I chose to rebuild my life. And Mama Spice is kind of my way of giving back to this beautiful city that sort of adopted us. Marseille is also where I started my first job. I became the first Indian national to be hired by Airbus helicopters. I was working in Marignan, and a couple of years later, let's call it life comes full circle. They asked me if I would be part of the task force team to go and set up the subsidiary of Airbus helicopters in India. I said, okay, why not? So they sent me back to India in 2010. For 10 years, I did not exist for my family. For 10 years, we were completely cut off. And when I returned to India, I was the director of business development, and then I took over the position of director of industrial cooperation. And everybody said, well, we knew you'd make it. I was like, thank you very much. And 2016, I've done a lot of stuff that is amazing in terms of career, but I sort of lost this purpose, the sense of why am I doing what I'm doing? And that's basically the debut of Mama Spice. And what I did was with the Indian spices and with the Mediterranean herbs, when I created these blends, all I did was study my competitors. What are they doing? And then I had the products, and then I went out there and I tested it live. The last semester of 2017, I did 4 pop-up stores with just Mama Spice, and getting that customer feedback was extremely important. Why? To validate the brand, to validate my pricing strategy, to validate my positioning in the market. Who is my customer base? Today, Mama Spice is used by Ludovic Chirac. He's the youngest Michelin star chef in Marseille, in France. Georgiana Vieux, she's a second customer, and she actually, in all of them, make typical French cuisine, Mediterranean cuisine. And Georgiana, she mixes my spices and uses them in her cuisine, in her restaurant. To see Mama Spice being used by Dame Farine, she is a baker. She makes bread out of with Mama Spice blends. Gaspar is one of the well-known cocktail bars. Ben makes cocktails out of my spices that are used for cuisine, for cooking. And everything that I did to give that visibility to the brand helped, because the customers, to get them to come back, it's not enough to just give them one more product. You have to create that link, and that's the reason why I did the pop-up stores. Little by little, I didn't pay for any of the marketing. Mama Spice started off as a bootstrap company. Slowly, the local press started picking it up. Slowly, people started recognizing me, and that's pretty odd. They say, "Oh, are you the creator of Mama Spice?" It's like, yes, I am. And social media and the free press that you can get enormously helps give that visibility to your brand. And it's something that everybody can use. Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, thank you, Devaky.
Hi, Devaky.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, was there any reason that you chose Marseille, and what were you studying when you were taking courses there?
Marseille was just one of the choices. I got admitted I did a Bachelor of Arts in Economics, Political Science and Statistics, and I applied to the University of Chicago, University of Massachusetts, Amherst, because I wanted to do a master's and then go on to do my PhD and then join the United Nations. That never worked out, because when I said to my father, listen, I've been admitted into the University of Chicago, but I need some money. I need you to pay my tuition fees. My father just said, nope. And then my brother, he said, he was working in Paris at that time, in Schlumberger, and he said, there are universities in France. And I'm like, listen, I don't speak a word of French. What am I going to come and do in France? And he goes, well, there are universities that teach completely in English. And so I looked up HEC, INSEAD, ESC, and I said, I'm still going to have the same issue. And call it destiny, call it fate, or whatever. The next morning, I opened the newspaper, and the director of Kedge Business School was coming in to interview students. I'd never been to an interview in my life. And I actually went there with the intention of finding out what is an interview, how does this thing happen? And after about an hour and a half, Charles Desprez, he says, it would be an honor to have you as a student. And I look at him and I said, well, I just came here to find out what an interview was. And so I integrated the Masters in International Business program, the first one by Kedge Business School, by the way, completely in English. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived.
Okay, thanks a lot. Any more questions, please, from our lovely audience? Yes? Thank you. I'm going to take a seat here in my living room, yeah? Whilst you talk.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I'm Pavlos from Infarm. I do plant research in my life. First of all, I love the fact that you're trying to replace salt and sugar with spices. Yeah. Should be healthier, again, depending on the portions. But you mentioned Monsanto. I'm not pro Monsanto, don't get me wrong here, but I've heard in my life a lot of people talking about Monsanto. Personally, I'm against the monopoly that Monsanto is creating. I have no problems with the GMOs, and trust me, there are no problems with GMOs. So I'm looking forward seeing your spices, one of your products, being made using a more healthy, let's say, GMO variety.
I spoke about Monsanto because of the consequences of certain usage of pesticides and the monopoly that was happening in the Indian agricultural scenario. And what GMO, non-GMO, it's not something that that is of a choice to me. If it is healthy, why not use it? And where I've got nothing against Monsanto, it's just that I have seen firsthand the ravages it can do when a farmer who cultivates 1 year is unable to get out of his debt, and that debt becomes a vicious circle, and he only gets deeper and deeper into it. And this is the only aspect about Monsanto and the usage of those pesticides that prevented him from reusing the seeds the next year, gaining the independence, and to be able to sell his produce. This is why I love my suppliers, because they have managed to create a movement which is pretty new in Indian agricultural scenario, is that organic farming is not people don't really know about it, and people don't ask the question because they don't have the money to spend on expensive produce. And what they have tried to do and initiate, I respect that enormously.
Pablo.
Yeah.
I understand this, and you mentioned Monsanto, and then you have mentioned fair trade.
Yeah.
Monsanto sounds very bad, like everybody who hears Monsanto thinks that it's something, it's the evil of the world. And fair trade...
Same as Philip Morris.
Fair trade is something good, right? But I've worked more than 15 years with people that they did research with fair trade. Mm-hmm. Does anyone in here knows who makes money out of this fair trade thing? Fair trade. Fair trade is making most of the money.
Yeah. I spoke about organic, I spoke about fair trade. None of the Mama Spice products are labeled AB or EcoCert or fair trade yet. And that is a choice that I am debating. Does anybody have an idea about how much it costs for certifications and to upkeep those certifications? The kind of processes you need to put into place. When you are a small startup, those startup costs are enormous. And when you talk about fair trade, my suppliers, I don't force them or tell them, I need a Max Havelaar label. I need this fair trade label, or in France, what they call the commerce équitable. They do have the USDA certifications, they do have the organic certifications for Japan and for the European Union. And for me, that's enough. To know that my source is sure, to know that my quality is guaranteed. And when I started the idea of mixing, the first thing I did was to go to the local grocery and buy the raw spices and make the blends. Then when I started Mama Spice, I went to Metro and then I bought the spices, the raw spices. And then I went to the organic stores and then I bought my spices to make my blends. And honestly speaking, I have been able to see that change in that taste, in that aroma, in that, how do I say it? It's different. And this is the reason why I have chosen to go in for organic. And if they can put into place the fair trade practices, the suppliers, that's perfect.
Okay, Pablo, anything else? Otherwise, you can come here and join us on stage. It's much more comfortable for everybody, yeah? We're going to see Pablo tomorrow, I believe, yeah? Here on stage. He's already, I think he wants to come out. He wanted to talk. Anyway, yes, sure. I mean, and she's a lovely speaker and she has answers for everything. Any more questions? I know we're really behind schedule, but we have to take advantage. Devaky is here. Any more questions? You okay? No? Okay. Listen, I was thinking whilst I was waiting for you, what you were talking, that like this morning, we had some of the roundtables telling us a story initially as a drama, family drama, the death of somebody you love, you have to take over the business, that ended up in a good conclusion. Yeah. It's a similar thing. I was thinking about your family and the way you had to run away from India. But had it not been for your father, in a way, who said no to that money for studying in the States, sure. You probably wouldn't be here today. And you'd be in the United Nations serving chili sandwiches to all the functionaries there, the same color as your shirt. So things happen for a reason.
Exactly.
It was lovely having you here.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Devaky. You cannot go before sending the organizations that recipe for the bolognese with ginger and whatever there is.
Oh yes, it's very simple.
So let's say thank you and a round of applause for Devaky.
Thank you.